Assalamualaikum to Dr. Aziz Lai. We are Group 2 and today we will be presenting our research proposal for FIN659 titled Banking and Economic Growth, a comparison between Islamic and conventional banking in Malaysia. I'll begin with the introduction. This study examines how Islamic and conventional banks contribute to Malaysia's economic growth within a dual banking system. Economic growth is measured using gross domestic product or GDP, which is the standard indicator for a country's economic performance. The banking sector plays a crucial role by mobilizing savings and channel financing to productive sectors of the economy. Therefore, this study compares how Islamic and conventional banking activities transmit funds to the real economy over the period from 2000 to 2025. In terms of background, Malaysia's Islamic banking sector has expanded significantly, particularly after the introduction of the Islamic Financial Services Act 2013. However, conventional banks continue to dominate the financial system in terms of asset size, deposit, and total lending. Structurally, Islamic banks differ because they emphasize asset-backed and risk-sharing financing, which often link to real economic activities. Despite this development, existing studies provide mixed and inconclusive findings and rarely offer a direct comparison between Islamic and conventional banking system in Malaysia. Now, this leads to the problem statement. Despite Malaysia's strong policy focus on developing a dual banking system, it remains unclear whether Islamic and conventional banking channels contribute differently to GDP growth. Most previous studies rely on aggregate banking indicators and lack direct comparative evidence, particularly for channels such as intermediation efficiency, entrepreneurship, financing, and financial inclusion. As a result, the actual mechanisms through which each banking system affects economic growth are still not fully understood. Based on this research gap, the study is guided by 5 key research questions. These include the impact of Islamic and conventional bank financing on GDP, the role of deposits in economic growth, whether intermediation efficiency, measured by the financing to deposit ratio, differs across banking system, the contribution of Islamic finance for entrepreneurship activities, and whether financial inclusion acts as a channel linking Islamic banking to economic growth.
Now, I will continue with the research objectives of our study. The main objective of this research is to examine and compare the contributions of Islamic banking and conventional banking to Malaysia's economic growth within a dual banking system. Since both systems operate side by side under the same regulatory framework, it is important to understand whether the different structures and financing approaches lead to different economic outcomes. Specifically, this study aims to evaluate the impact of Islamic bank financing and conventional bank financing on GDP. It also analyzes how Islamic and conventional bank deposits influence economic growth. In addition, the study assesses intermediation efficiency using the financing to deposit ratio, which examines the role of Islamic finance for entrepreneurship activities and investigates financial inclusion through the Financial Inclusion Index as a channel linking banking development to economic growth. Next, I will explain the scope of the study. This research focuses specifically on Malaysia, which is well known for its mature dual banking systems, where Islamic and conventional banks coexist under a single regulatory framework. The study examines the relationship between banking activities and economic growth, with gross domestic product or GDP used as the indicator of economic performance. The analysis covers the period from 2000 to 2025 using macro-level time series data. The key banking variables include Islamic and conventional financing, deposits, intermediation efficiency, Islamic entrepreneurship financing, and financial inclusion. This scope allows us to make a comprehensive comparison between both banking systems over a long period. Despite its comprehensive scope, this study also has several limitations. First, it relies entirely on secondary data, which limits the analysis to variables that are consistently available over time. Second, the study uses aggregate banking data, which may not fully capture differences at the individual bank level. Third, the research is focused only on Malaysia, so the findings may not be directly generalized to countries with different financial or regulatory systems. Lastly, qualitative aspects such as managerial efficiency or customer behavior are not included as the study focuses on quantitative econometric analysis. Moving on to the implications of the study. From a policy perspective, the findings of this research can assist Bank Negara Malaysia and other policymakers in evaluating the relative effectiveness of Islamic and conventional banking in promoting economic growth. Insights into financing, deposits, intermediation efficiency, entrepreneurship financing, and financial inclusion can help guide policies aimed at strengthening productive and inclusive growth. From an academic perspective, this study contributes to the existing literature by providing a comparative empirical analysis using disaggregated banking indicators. By integrating intermediation efficiency, Islamic entrepreneurship financing, and financial inclusion into a single framework, the study extends prior research that relied mainly on aggregate banking measures. To conclude Chapter 1, this chapter establishes the foundation and direction of the study. It highlights important gaps in the literature, particularly the lack of comparative evidence on specific banking channels such as deposits, intermediation efficiency, entrepreneurship financing, and financial inclusion. Overall, Chapter 1 sets the motivation and framework for the study and prepares the groundwork for the literature review in Chapter 2 and the empirical methodology discussed in Chapter 3.
I will carry on with the presentation. This study used a multi-theoretical framework to examine how Islamic and conventional banks drive economic growth in Malaysia. First, the endogenous growth theory showed that internal factors like capital, human resources, and finance drive growth. Both Islamic and conventional banks fund productive sector, but Islamic finance asset-based, risk-sharing approach align more closely with real economic activity. Second, financial intermediation theory explain how banks turn deposits into productive investment. Conventional bank use interest-based loan, while Islamic bank use profit and loss sharing, creating differences in short-term versus long-term growth effect. Third, institutional theory highlight that regulation, culture, and norms matter. In Malaysia, Islamic banking increases financial inclusion, reaching underserved population and boosting economic participation. Combined, this theory explains why Islamic and conventional banks affect GDP differently through financing, efficiency, and inclusion.
I will now present 2.3 empirical findings. Recent Malaysia-specific studies show that Islamic and conventional banking affect economic growth measured by GDP through different but complementary channels. First, Islamic bank financing (IBF) has a positive long-run effect on GDP, but the relationship is weak and unidirectional financing drive growth, but not vice versa. In contrast, Islamic bank deposit (IBD) show bidirectional causality with GDP, creating a reinforcing cycle. As the economic grows, more deposits flow into Islamic bank, which then fund productive activities, further boosting growth. For conventional banking, while no study directly tests conventional bank financing (CBF) against GDP, evidence show conventional banks dominate in asset size, lending volume, and market share, suggesting a strong role in credit creation. Also, conventional bank deposits (CBD) are larger and more liquid, and their interest rates cause Islamic deposit returns, showing systematic pricing leadership. A key finding comes from Ledem and Morsawi, 2024, who introduced Islamic finance for entrepreneurship activities (IFENT), financing directed to real sectors (SMEs). The study found that a 1% increase in IFENT raises GDP by up to 2.48%, proving that productive alignment matters more than total financing volume. Additionally, the financing to deposit ratio (FDR) reveals a trade-off. Conventional banks achieve higher technical efficiency due to scale, while Islamic banks show better allocative efficiency and asset quality. Finally, the Financial Inclusion Index (FII) shows that Islamic banking significantly improves access for rural, low-income, and religiously motivated groups, making growth not just faster but more inclusive.
Chapter 2 concludes that the Islamic and conventional banking contribute to Malaysia's economic growth through different but complementary channels. Grounded in endogenous growth theory, financial intermediation theory, and institutional theory, the literature shows Islamic banking drives growth via deposit mobilization, entrepreneurship financing like IFAN, and financial inclusions, while the conventional banking relies more on scale and credit depth. Critically, using disaggregated indicators such as IBF, CBF, IBD, and so on allows us to capture this unique mechanism within Malaysia's dual banking system. These strong theoretical and empirical foundations directly supports our comparative econometric approach in Chapter 3.
I will now move on to Chapter 3, which focuses on the research methodology. This chapter explains how the study empirically investigates the comparative contributions of Islamic and conventional banking systems to Malaysia's economic growth. Rather than treating the banking sector as a single entity, the study adopts a comparative approach that distinguishes Islamic banking from conventional banking. This distinction is important because both systems differ in terms of structure, contractual arrangement, and institutional principles which may influence their impact on economic development. The study uses secondary time series data and applies econometric analysis using Stata software to ensure robustness and reliability of the results. Next, I will explain the methodological choice used in this study. The research adopts a quantitative approach which is suitable for analyzing numerical data and identifying statistically significant relationships between banking variables and GDP. This approach allows the study to objectively compare Islamic and conventional banking in terms of financing, deposits, and intermediation efficiency. In addition, the inclusion of Islamic finance for entrepreneurship activities and the Financial Inclusion Index enables the analysis to capture broader channels through which Islamic banking may contribute to economic growth. All analyses are conducted using Stata software, which enhances the transparency, consistency, and analytical rigor of the study. That's all from me. I will pass this presentation to the next presenter.
I will now explain section 3.3, which is the purpose of the research design. The main purpose of this research design is to examine how Islamic and conventional banking system influence Malaysia's economic growth, measured using gross domestic product or GDP. The study identifies key research issues, particularly how financing deposits, intermediation efficiency, Islamic finance for entrepreneurship, and financial inclusion act as channels through which banking development affects economic growth. To address these issues, this study adopts an explanatory research design. This design is appropriate because it allows the study to examine cause and effect relationships between banking variables and GDP rather than merely describing trends. In addition, the research design accounts for time series characteristics, enabling the analysis of both short-run and long-run relationships while controlling for structural differences between Islamic and conventional banks. Overall, the research design is aligned with established economic theory and empirical literature, ensuring valid hypothesis testing and reliable interpretation of results within Malaysia's dual banking framework. Next, I will explain section 3.4, which is the research strategy. This study applies a quantitative time series approach using annual data from the year 2000 to 2025. This approach allows the analysis of both short-term and long-term effects of Islamic and conventional banking systems on Malaysia's economic growth. The main econometric method employed is the autoregressive distributed lag or ARDL approach, which is estimated using Stata software. The ARDL method is suitable for this study because it works well with small sample sizes and variables that are integrated at order 0 or order 1. The research strategy adopts a comparative framework by incorporating Islamic and conventional banking variables, including Islamic bank financing and conventional bank financing, Islamic and conventional bank deposits, and the financing to deposit ratio to measure intermediation efficiency. Beyond aggregate banking indicators, the strategy also includes Islamic finance for entrepreneurship activities and the Financial Inclusion Index to capture real sector alignment and inclusive growth effects. Through this research strategy, the study is able to provide a comprehensive and comparative assessment of how Islamic and conventional banking system contribute to Malaysia's economic growth in line with all the research questions of the study.
Now, moving to 3.5, data and sources. The dependent variable is GDP, sourced from the Department of Statistics Malaysia (DOSM), measured in real terms, RM billion at constant prices. All banking variables come from Bank Negara Malaysia's monthly statistical bulletin. This includes IBF and IBT for Islamic banking, while CBF and CBT are derived by subtracting Islamic figures from total banking data. We also include IFPNT, which financing to real sector SME. In addition, we compute separate FTRs to measure intermediation efficiency, and we use the Financial Inclusion Index (FII) to reflect access among underserved groups across Malaysia.
Next is 3.6, Theoretical Framework. As illustrated in Figure 3.6,
brings together the same three theories we have discussed, but now directly connect them with our variables. First, endogenous growth theory explains why Islamic finance for entrepreneurship activities or IFENT is expected to have a stronger impact on GDP than general financing because it is specifically channeled into real sector SMEs, which is the activity that directly expand the economy's productive capacity. Second, financial intermediation theory, on the other hand, justifies our use of the financing to deposit ratio or FDR to compare how efficiently each banking system turns deposit into financing. While conventional banks may lend more quickly due to their scale, Islamic banks operate through asset-backed and risk-sharing contracts which promote more careful, stable, and sustainable growth over time. Lastly, institutional theory helps us understand how Malaysia's strong regulatory support, especially through the Islamic Financial Services Act 2013, has enabled Islamic banking to reach underserved groups like rural and low-income communities, thereby boosting financial inclusion and broadening the base of economic participation.
This study used a time series research design to analyze the relationship between banking development and economic growth in Malaysia, comparing Islamic and conventional banking from 2000 to 2025. The longitudinal approach allows the study to capture the evolving dynamics of Malaysia's dual banking system and its impact on economic growth over time. This study looks at both short-term and long-term relationship between banking indicators and GDP, and it also studies cause and effect relationship. Time series data allows the use of advanced economic methods such as co-integration and error correction models. These methods help separate short-term changes from long-term relationship. Overall, this country-focused approach fits Malaysia's unique banking system well. Section 3.8 explains the diagnostic checklist for the time series regression model. These tests are important to make sure the model results are reliable and the basic assumptions of time series analysis are met. Three diagnostic tests are used in this study: the variance inflation factor, the serial correlation test, and the normality test on residuals. First, the variance inflation factor is used to check multicollinearity among the independent variables. In banking studies, financing and deposit variables often moving together with the economy, which can increase standard errors and affect significance. A VIF value of 1 means no multicollinearity. Values between 1 and 5 are acceptable, while values above 5 or 10 indicate serious multicollinearity problem. Second, the serial correlation test check whether the error terms are related over time. Since this study used annual data from 2000 to 2025, the Bruce-Cockburn test is applied because it can detect higher order autocorrelation. If the p-value is greater than 0.05, it means there is no serial correlation in the model. Finally, the normality test on residual is conducted using the Jaque-Pera test. This test check whether the residuals are normally distributed, which is important for valid statistical tests, especially with a small sample size. A p-value above 0.05 shows that the residuals are normally distributed, supporting the reliability of the result.
Next is method approach. For our data analysis, we use the RDL bounds testing approach developed by Pasaran et al. 2001. This method is ideal because it works well with small sample sizes like ours, covering from 2000 to 2025, and allows variables to be either I0 or I1 without requiring pre-differencing. Our model examines how Islamic and conventional banking indicators such as IBF, CBF, IBD, CBD, their respective financing to deposit ratio, IFIN, and the financial inclusion index affect the real GDP. The analysis happens in two steps. First, we run a bound F test to check for long-run co-integrations. If confirmed, we estimate both the long-run coefficients and the short-run error corrections model to capture adjustment dynamics. In conclusion, this study used a robust quantitative time series designs 2000 to 2025 to compare how Islamic and conventional banking contribute to Malaysia's growth using the RDL bounds testing method. We go beyond aggregate numbers by using disaggregated indicators like financing, deposit, FDR, IFIN, and FII to capture key channels like intermediation, efficiency, entrepreneurship support, and financial inclusions. And importantly, Our approach is theoretically grounded and empirically rigorous, with diagnostics check ensuring reliable results that directly answer all 5 research questions. That's the end of our presentations. Thank you to Dr. Aziz for watching and listening.